Next is superphylum Deuterostomia. Unlike the rest of the invertebrates in this chapter, echinoderms are deuterostomes just like our phylum Chordata. This means that the anus is developed first and then the mouth is developed last during embryological development. There's also radial cleavage during the 8-cell stage of development, in which the top layer of cells remains parallel with the bottom layer. And finally, a coelom made from endodermal pouches. So Phylum Echinodermata means prickly skin and includes 7,000 species of marine bottom-dwelling organisms. Echinoderms have pentaradial symmetry, where they can be divided into 5 planes. They have an endoskeleton made of calcareous ossicles, also known as bony plates, covered by an epidermis. Echinoderms are named for having spiny skin, which may be used for defense or reinforcement of the epidermis and endoskeleton. Many echinoderms have a central disc that contains the digestive and nervous organs and arms that extend to these structures, as well as house reproductive organs. Echinoderms have tube feet, exclusive to this group, that can be used for movement, feeding, attachment to substrate, and chemical sensations. Echinoderms have a water vascular system derived from the coelom, which pushes water throughout the animal for locomotion, feeding, respiration, transport of food and waste, and attachment to a substrate. Before beginning with the anatomy, there are 2 different anatomical designations to discuss. The oral side of an echinoderm refers to the side that has the mouth. Most of the time it's on the bottom of the organism. The aboral side is just the opposing side. So when you look at a sea star, you're basically looking at its aboral side. So a madreporite is found on the aboral surface, which draws water in and regulates the movement of water inside of this animal. There's a central ring in the center with radial canals going to each arm. Tube feet extend or contract by the water pressure in the system from the radial canals and can be used for feeding and touch. Individual tube feet are controlled by a bulb-like ampulla. The nervous system is made of a nerve ring in the center with 5 radial nerves into the arms. No brains are found in this group, but some species may have sensory organs. Digestion starts at the mouth on the oral side, then goes through a short esophagus into the stomach. The stomach can actually be everted outside of the animal to feed. Throughout the arms, there are pyloric ceca that both digest and distribute food to each arm. Excretion of nitrogenous waste products occur via the podocytes found in the center of the central disc. Excretion is performed via diffusion from cells into the water inside the sea star, and the water leaves via the madreporite. Echinoderms are dioecious with external fertilization. Even though this group is pentaradial, their larvae begin life with bilateral symmetry. Echinoderms are also asexually reproduced via fragmentation and regeneration, with up to 75% of the body lost. There are 5 classes of echinoderms, the most well-known being class Asteroidea, also known as the sea stars. With over 1,800 species, they come in a variety of shapes, sizes, and colors. All sea stars have thick arms that radiate from a central disc with body systems branched into the arms. They contain simple eyes and touch receptors and use tube feet for gripping prey and crawling. Sea stars are carnivores, using its tube feet for manipulating bivalve shells into opening and secreting digestive juices on prey before swallowing them whole by everting their stomach into the shell. They're very patient, as the stomach begins digesting the bivalve alive, weakening the adductor muscles inside the bivalve, causing the bivalve to fully open. Therefore, the sea star can have its lunch. Class Ophiuroidea, also known as the brittle stars, are very similar to sea stars, except the central disc is pretty conspicuous next to the slender arms. These arms are quite flexible and muscular. They do not use the water vascular system for movement, instead muscular tissue. Next group is class Echinoidea, known as the sea urchins, sand dollars, sea cookies, sea biscuits, etc. They have no arms, but the pentaradial configuration is modified to a fused test. Sea urchins have actual spines, with some being poisonous to humans. Sand dollar spines are not as pronounced. Both groups use tube feet for cleaning the body's surface. Most echinoids graze on algae using a specialized mouthpart called the Aristotle's lantern. Other echinoids are suspension feeders or may simply feed on dead or decaying material. The next group is crinoids, which include the sea lilies and feather stars. This class is mostly sessile, and they are suspension feeders. The feathers of these groups are highly branched with tube feet used to capture food and send it directly to the mouth. Crinoids are the most ancient of echinoderms and were dominant in ancient oceans. They now compose of 600 species. Holothuridia, known as the sea cucumbers, appear to evolve back into bilateral symmetry due to the extended oral and aboral surfaces lying horizontally. Tube feet are only found on the side of the animal that allows for movement. And some sea cucumbers have clusters of tentacles around the mouth where they feed on detritus or act as suspension feeders. Perhaps the neatest feature is their ability to undergo evisceration, where they can spit out all of their guts to scare potential predators. It's a pretty disgusting and slimy mess. So while the majority of chordates are vertebrates, there are some invertebrate examples. Regardless, all chordates share these 5 features that appear at some point during development. 1. A notochord, which helps support the dorsal hollow nerve cord. There are pharyngeal slits, a post-anal tail, and finally a thyroid gland that secretes iodinated hormones, mostly for metabolic functions. Chordates consist of 3 clades: Urochordata, known as the tunicates, Cephalochordata, known as the lancelets, and these encompass your invertebrate chordates, while the rest of the chordates are vertebrates, which are animals with backbones. And that is the topic of our next chapter, vertebrates.